True story, I was thumbing over Instagram recently and I saw the coolest picture of a quilt on an antique airplane. And as I zoomed in closer to get the details, I found out it was one of our brand ambassadors, Horton's newest pattern called Destinations. Better than that, Michael Miller Fabrics Cotton Couture fell in love with it. I asked her if I could teach all of you how to make it. I'm going to show you starting with the center today. Let's get started. That's right. Destinations pattern here is super cool. And this is one of the images that Charisma had put up on her Instagram, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Now I'm going to walk you through the pattern today because the pattern is basically focused on just two very simple blocks, and I'm going to show you how to make that construction. I'm going to let you colorize it your way, and this is a pattern that Charisma actually sells, and that's something I want you to do to support her. You can get it from your local quilt shop. You can get it from her at any rate. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the basics. I'm going to let you rely on the pattern for all the details you truly need. So as I was saying, the quilt itself focuses off of two major blocks. This one I think is super cool and also incredibly easy to make. I'll walk you through the steps in a few minutes here. And then this one is a really basically a plaid style block. And this one is super simple. It works off of strips that are all made, and we're gonna basically talk in three different colors, or I should say three different shades, light, medium, and dark. And so you're gonna have your strips laid out, and you're gonna do two different combinations. You're gonna do one strip set where you have your two mediums and your light, and you're going to do another strip set. I don't have much of it left because I've already started the project, obviously. And in this strip set, you're going to have your two darks and your medium. So when they're put back together, they're cut down, the strips are stitched together. The strips are then pressed, cut apart into these subunits like this here you see. And then for our subunits, we're going to take two where we have our dark pieces on the outside and one that has the medium piece here on the outside, and we're going to stitch these together. Now, one of the tricks you can do, because these are universal, right, is with these strips, is as you get ready to put them together, look first on the one that has the light in the center and see which way the seam is pointing. This one right now is pointing down. So as I get ready to marry these right sides together, I'm just going to rotate this first one so that it is now pointing seams up, so that those seams are going to nest nice together, and that'll give me a really nice approach to my patchwork. Let me lower my presser foot here with my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to stitch through. And I'm just kind of got my finger, you could use a straight pin, securing that little section right there. And then after I get over that one, I'm going to just line up the next one, and I'm going to get a really nice even patchwork here. Simple enough to sew your units together, and then we can go over to the iron and press them once we have all of the pieces. So again, I'm going to just do the same thing. I'm going to now check to see that that one is pointing up, rotate, pointing down, stitch it together, and this block will be completely constructed. So for the project itself, you're going to need to make 4 of these blocks that look just like this. And then there's a little switcheroo that happens in the center of the pattern, and we're going to need our leftover pieces. So let me grab my pattern and refer to what's going to happen there in my instructions. And it really says here, from our leftover cuts, and I'm going to show you the way I'm going to do this. This is super cool. So I'm going to set aside so I don't cut into anything I need. I'm going to now go ahead and take from the sections that are leftovers what I need, but I'm going to cut them first as complete strips. So in the pattern, they were cut at 4 1/4, just double checking, 4 1/2. And so I'm going to make sure I've got everything I need here on my 4 1/2. My 4 1/2, I'm looking through here, and I'm lining up all my seams and everything nice. And then as I cut this off like this here, and I refer to the instructions. So from the leftovers, I'm going to need from my dark, and it says red because that was the center, but I'm just using my green, and this is the beautiful cotton couture from Michael Miller Fabrics. So I'm going to need 4 of those. I've just made 2 of them, and early in the cutting instructions, it actually asked for an extra strip. So now you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to disassemble these pieces the same I'm going to do to disassemble these pieces to build out our block. So let me get my ripper ready and rock and roll through this stuff. Now, one of the things I do when I seam rip, I don't know if you've heard this trick anywhere before. Hopefully we don't talk a lot about seam ripping, but it is a skill we should have as quilters. I actually put my patchwork back together the way it was when it came out of the sewing machine. Come on over to my iron, hit it real quick, basically putting the seams back the way they were, which is going to help it make it, well, less likely for me to snag a thread. So whether you're the kind of person that likes to work in the middle or on the top, however you like to do that, it makes it a little easier to get in here and get that seam taken care of right away. Once your threads are out, now you have that perfect 4.5-inch square again. Stockpile those up, and I'm going to show you how to put that block right back together for the center of the destinations blocks. This is super cool. Ripping is complete, and we have ourselves the piles of pieces we need to make that last center block. So I'm going to need a single light square for the center. And in our original blocks, remember, you made 4 of these, and you had your darks in the corner. So we're just going to do a switcheroo. We're going to put the mediums in the corner and the darks in the middle positions here. So let's just go ahead and do that together. We're going to take one here, 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 and here. Then I'll throw the mediums into the corner like this to create that next block. Now, earlier we were sewing these all together in rows, so we're just going to take a moment and build new columns. Okay, and now our custom center block for the destinations center block is made. And just as a reminder, you can see these are going to line up just like this to kind of have a fun completion of the checkerboard as they go across the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch these now together to build our center row so that it's completely set on the design wall and we're ready to go. And now we're going to do that second awesome square, which I think brings this entire quilt back together, which is really, really cool. Now, throughout the pattern, the colors and the placements really change. So that's where you're going to really need to be paying attention to which colors you use where to bring all of the really clever movement together in the pattern. For me, I'm doing single colors, and now I'm going to introduce of our cotton couture, the bright white and the black and the cream color into my green family that I'm using. And then the next thing I need to point out is from the pattern itself, I've actually cut out my template piece here. So I can go ahead and move these pattern pages away. So for each of the blocks that you see, you're going to need one of the template pieces here. You'll also need a 11¼ inch square. This is diagonal cut in both directions so that you get 4 of these really cool triangles out of the deal. So you're going to go ahead and build this portion first because it's really, really simple. What I want to point out though is when you go to line up your positioning before you go to stitch it together, you're wisest to look at this bottom edge. That's going to be your straight line. If you've never pieced with triangles before, you often get this runoff or this tail to make sure that all of this line lines up. Well, let me show you. So I'm going to fold this over and I'm going to go to the machine, and I'm really most focused on this bottom corner, everything nice and straight on the straight edges as I start my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to flip the fabric over so I can make sure I'm sewing in a direction I want to be sewing in. What I'm going to do for this block is I'm always going to try to press into the dark side. Actually, with the rest of the half square triangles, I'm going to try to do that. So for this particular one, because I'm using a cream and a black, I'm pushing into the black seam allowance there. And hopefully now you can see exactly what I was referring to. Now that edge lines up perfectly. So again, I'm just going to sew looking at these lines here, knowing that runs long. That's exactly what it's supposed to look like. That's not bad cutting on your part. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. And now as I begin to press this edge over, I'll just point out that half of the next block is already done. Pretty cool, isn't it? And these are really easy to stitch if you'll just do that straight edge trick there. Now the next portion of the block we're going to build is this portion, and it really breaks into these half square triangles like this. And for this particular pattern, we're making our half square triangles by using a couple of squares. These are 4 7/8 if I remember correctly, but again, check the pattern. I would hate to give you the wrong information while you're following the pattern right there in front of you. What I would like you to do, however, is I want you to take a nice ruler and a Sharpie marker or a pencil. This is going to be cut. This will never be part of the project. I'm just going to do a straight edge, straight line, all the way through that there. I'm going to take and lay these. If you had prints, they would be right sides together right now. And I'm going to come over to my sewing machine, and now with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, that edge is the 1/4 inch line. That line we just drew is a 1/4 inch line. So I'm going to drop it with my edge guide on that edge. I'm going to sew all the way along here at about a medium pace because I'm on the bias. So all the way off, lifting my presser foot up. I can actually just swing this kind of around almost like I'm chain piecing. Lower the presser foot again on that other side of that line. So we're actually making 2 half square triangles right now out of this 1 square. After that's done, you're going to go ahead and take your rotary cutter, ruler, just to keep your hand safe. Cut that line you just drew there a second ago. And now you're going to have yourselves 2 awesome half square triangles. We're going to press these over to the dark side by holding the black fabric up in the air, pressing over. But for the block, you actually need 3. So we need 3 half square triangles. And what I also want to point out right now is the orientation of all of this is universal. I've already tested it. So just make 1 block and make them all of the same. So if I lay this one right here while I'm looking at it, I'm going to put 1 white half square triangle, points that way. A second one points that way. A third one points that way. Then I also had 4 7/8 squares cut diagonally of my green fabric. Now, in the pattern, it calls for the darkest of the fabrics. I accidentally used the medium or the true color of the fabric, so my blocks are slightly different than the pattern, and that's just what quilters do. Just like taking the squares apart to put them back together again earlier. That's just what quilters do. Now, in order to build this block, we're going to build it in 3 different sections. I'm going to sew these 2 squares together first, so I'm folding them over, go into my sewing machine. I'm going to lay this back into place to make sure that I get it correct, because now I'm just going to go ahead and sew on my green half triangle. And this is the exact same situation. I'm going to sew on looking at this straight edge here, and I'm not going to worry about that tip running long there. So I'm going to fold it over, and that way I'm looking at that entire edge as I sew on this nice edge, nice and straight. And the more I work with triangles, the more I find that actually helps all the time. I'll show you that again here in a second. I'm just going to take a moment and press the blocks, or the columns as we're doing. I don't know if there's much rhyme or reason at this point anymore to which way I'm pressing. I am going to set it back onto the table, the design, so I know right where I'm at. Now I'm just going to marry 1 triangle to 1 half square triangle, block. Snuck that word in at the last second, didn't I? Little buzzer shot for the vocabulary. So now that those two are made, this one's going to go right on here. But now we're looking at this long edge up here. Okay, so I'm going to fold it over this way, making sure that's secure. Now I'm going to come from the top down. I like to start with my needle out in front of those triangle tips, but my new Juki's got a pretty fancy patchwork feature. I have not lost a corner yet. Ideal. Those pieces are going to go together with these pieces, watching for that seam right there to line up. Double checking before I get too far ahead of myself. Now the other half of our block is constructed once that seam has been handled. We're going to now join the two halves. So I'm going to take this half here, and I'm going to take this half here. And first of all, this propeller portion or whatever is going to line right back up into this way. You can see the triangles are almost exactly the same size, and almost is the best way that I quilt. What I found out is while we're sewing this seam is as I fold these over right sides together, again, just like we were doing earlier, I'm actually now watching this edge, and I'm going to do my best to keep this corner down here lined up, because by keeping that corner down there lined up really helps me get this in the center. There's going to be a little bit of stretch and give because some of this is on the bias as we're going now. So we're going to slow down our machine a little. And again, I'm just watching this outside edge, and now I'm just going to give a little extra encouragement with my finger. You could use a straight pin right here just to keep those corner tips lined up. And after I kind of cross over that center, I'm now watching actually this outside back edge here, making sure it stayed lined up to ensure that I'm not distorting or tweaking the block to get my bias edges to match. That's why folks fear the bias so often. They're afraid they're going to be over distorting or pulling on things. As we come to the ironing surface, I'm going to iron up away from all of this neutral colored fabric, all of that cream. And then as I get ready to build what will technically be the top or the bottom row, these portions here are going to face outward so that our center can face inward. So in the pattern, it's the same fabric that touches here. Fortunately, I chose the second best choice, so it's still checkerboards as it goes around. So I'm going to look at these seam allowances. I'm going to fold that fabric over right now while we're talking about it and just stitch this together. I got lucky. My center block, my checkerboard was already in an orientation where my seam allowances were nesting, so you could look for that if you hadn't already. Match up your seam points as we go through. That'll give the impression of more accurate patchwork. Now, as we come back on over here, probably start taking a moment to tidy up some of this stuff, because technically I can just press this seam, and I'm just going to press it in towards our checkered block, our center block right now, and I'll do the same for the other side. It'll keep that white fabric really nice and crisp. And because we've already stitched together our center column, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this column and we're going to connect it here to this column, just looking at each stitch point or piecing points as we go along. I'm going to lay those in like yay. Oh, and look at this. As I flipped it over, I can see that all of my seams are now in the same direction. And all I have to do, I believe, is rotate this thing 180 because it's all universal. And now it looks like my seam allowances will nest. They'll be going opposite directions like I've been talking about, and that's going to make life so much better. Can't guarantee it'll happen on the next side, but we might as well take advantage of it now as we line up this first 2 stitch points. Or these first two corners. I keep calling them stitch points. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about today. Let's drop that presser foot and get some thread laid down. And I'm just going to check that first union. And each one as I go along the way. All right, and there it is. I actually got that last row on as well for the center of the Destinations quilt by Charisma Horton. Charisma, thank you so very much for this wonderful pattern. You were right. It is super simple, just 2 blocks. I absolutely love it. Folks at home that are following along, I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Please give Charisma some love. Check out all of her other patterns she has available for all of you to learn from. And also, she just started a fantastic block of the month pattern and program where she uses the fabulous cotton couture from Michael Miller. It's a great, great block of the month pattern. So hopefully you'll check all of that out. I'll make sure all of that information is linked in the description below. Enjoy putting your patchwork together, and we will see you real soon for another fantastic tutorial right here at Making It Fun. I'm glad to see you're still there. Hey, if you insist on spending all day on YouTube, great with me. Please check out a few of my other videos. I think they're fantastic. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified. We'll see you next time for another helping of fun.